बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम। अस्सलाम वालेकुम स्टूडेंट्स। आज हम रिसर्च मेथोडोलॉजी का लेक्चर नंबर 2 ले रहे हैं। इसमें बेसिकली हम 3 चीज़ों को कवर करेंगे। द फर्स्ट थिंग वी विल कवर इज़ हाउ टू आइडेंटिफाई द ब्रॉड प्रॉब्लम एरिया, जो बेसिकली आपकी एक ऑब्जर्वेशन बेस्ड आइडेंटिफिकेशन होती है ऑफ अ प्रॉब्लम। अ ब्रॉड प्रॉब्लम एरिया जो है हम आइडेंटिफाई करते हैं थ्रू आवर ऑब्जर्वेशन इन एन ऑर्गेनाइजेशन। दूसरी जो चीज़ हम आज बात करेंगे वो हम बात करेंगे प्रिलिमिनरी information gathering regarding the research problem। बेसिकली इसमें हम देखेंगे कि ऑर्गेनाइजेशनल लेवल का उसका जो बैकग्राउंड का इंफॉर्मेशन जो है वो हम लेने की कोशिश करेंगे। सेकंड थिंग वी विल ट्राई टू डू इज़ फाइंड आउट what sort of literature is available in regarding the broad problem area। So हमारा बेसिकली जो इंफॉर्मेशन प्रिलिमिनरी जो स्टेज ऑफ इंफॉर्मेशन गैदरिंग है, इसमें हम ये देख रहे हैं कि ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में किस किस्म की ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है, क्या करती है, व्हाट सॉर्ट ऑफ बैकग्राउंड इट हैज़ गॉट, ऑपरेशंस क्या हैं इसके। और दूसरी चीज़ जो हम है वो हम बेसिकली लिटरेचर रिव्यू लेंगे और उसमें देखेंगे कि जो लिटरेचर है, एग्जिस्टिंग जो पब्लिश्ड लिटरेचर है, उसमें क्या इस पर्टिकुलर प्रॉब्लम के बारे में लिखा गया हुआ है। और तीसरी चीज़ जो है, आफ्टर गोइंग दीज 2 एरियाज इन डिटेल, हम बात करेंगे कि हम अपनी जो रिसर्च प्रॉब्लम है या रिसर्च स्टेटमेंट जो है उसको हम फॉर्मुलेट करेंगे। सो बेसिकली 3 एरियाज़ हैं जिनको हम कवर करेंगे आज। फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल वी विल कवर द ब्रॉड प्रॉब्लम एरिया, हाउ दैट पर्टिकुलर स्टेप। सेकेंडली we will talk about information gathering, preliminary information gathering, and third we will talk about basically developing our research problem statement. So before we go into details of that, let's have a recap of the last lecture. So what we talked about in the last session, we basically examined what is research, and we said that it is a systematic effort to investigate a problem. And second thing we talked about was we introduced the different types of research. We talked about applied research and basic research. When we're talking about applied research, we said that this is the kind of research we'll try to solve a current problem of an organization. And a basic research is basically which tries to improve the understanding of a problem in a particular area. Once we looked at that, then we talked about why managers should know about research. Although research could be a very focused area, focused activity of an organizational individual, but still managers of an organization also need to know why research is important, and they need to know that how to basically identify a problem. We need, as managers, we need to know, we should be able to differentiate between good and bad research. As managers, we should be able to appreciate the multiple influence of different variables and factors on that particular problem. Then we also talked about the different hallmarks of a scientific research, indicating what a good research would be, what are the different parameters of a good research. We talked about the research. A good research should have a purpose. A good research should have rigor. Good research should be testable. It should be replicable. There should be precision, and we should have a confidence of coming up with the results. And good research also should have clear-cut objectives. And good research also needs to be generalized on the whole population. And finally, a good research has to be parsimonious. So considering all these different hallmarks which we talked about last session that a good research should have, we also talked about the research process, or the building blocks of scientific research, and we identified that it consists of different steps. It starts with the observation, moves on by identifying the problem area, then developing of theoretical framework, developing of hypothesis, and then we were talking about research design, data collection, analysis, interpretation, and implementation of the theory and refinement of the theory. So this is what we talked about last time, and moving on from this point onwards, now we're going to look at the first few activities concerning the scientific research process. That we will be focusing on the broad problem area, identifying the broad problem area. The second thing we'll be talking about is identifying collecting the preliminary information in a particular work setting. That what I mean is we will try to collect information about the organization, as I said earlier. Then we will try to talk about today, as I said, about the literature survey, how to go about it, and what is the method of collecting data, especially the information about the issue. We will also talk about how to write a good literature review, particularly, and at the end we'll talk about developing our research problem. The outcomes of this particular session would be that we'll be able to identify variables of interest, variables which are relevant to the research problem or research situation. We will also be able to develop, as I said, that we'll be able to develop what we call as a literature review concerning that particular area. We will be also developing specific problem statements, giving direction to our research activities. Here's again a recap of the whole process, research process, starting with observation, preliminary data collection, problem definition, theoretical framework, generation of hypothesis, research design, data collection, interpretation, deduction, and report writing. If we look at all these processes, which were the 9 different processes we looked at, we could group them into 3 different areas. The first part could be stated or could be referred as the process, which is step 1 to 5 could be considered as the process of identifying the broad problem area, literature review, problem statement, conceptual framework, and hypothesis generation. The second grouping we could do is what we call as the planning. So the first is the process. The second grouping is planning, in which we basically try to locate, try to find out what are we going to do in terms of the study, what is the kind of sample we're going to be collecting, what sort of data we're going to be collecting, what sort of analysis we'll be doing. So this step number 6 and 7 are basically related to the planning of the research, in which we need to think over and see and think in terms of what are the things we need to do in order to complete our research. And following that, we'll be talking about step number 8 and 9, which basically can be stated as the deduction segment, in which we will be trying to prove the hypothesis through collection of data. Once we are able to collect the data, we will try to prove our hypothesis, and based on the hypothesis we will be able to draw our conclusions and provide certain recommendations. So the 3 steps could be grouped into the process. The first one to step number 1 to 5 are related to the process of the research activity. The second is the planning, and the third is the deduction, in which we basically do an analysis and come up with conclusions. Starting with the broad problem area, as we said, that a manager, while in his organization, could observe that there is something wrong, which is not normal, which is different, and based on his observation or the cues his employees are giving, the suggestions his employees are giving, he could identify that there is some problem in the organization. And based on this observation which he has, he will be able to basically try to move forward and try to see and to understand what is wrong with this this particular organization, and within that context he will try to see what that problem is and what are the factors which are causing it. So based on the observation and his focus, the manager might be able to identify a broad problem area, which if we look at, it could be defined as the entire situation where one sees a possible need for research and problem solving. So once the manager is able to see that there is a problem, and he is basically concerned, his main concern is to understand that problem and to solve the problem. So research can help him out for that, and he can basically go further and try to see what are the issues which are influencing this particular problem area. A few examples of a problem area could be that training programs are not effective as they were anticipated. A manager might be able to see or observe that his employees are not happy with the training programs, or the kind of output which is expected from them after this training is not coming up. He would be concerned about it, and that could be one problem area which needs for him to be researched, and they need to identify and resolve the problem for that and solve it. Another problem area could be that there's an increased dissatisfaction in with his customers. That is that the customers are dissatisfied with their service or their product or whatever, and this is again an issue which manager might be able to observe in his store. Let's say that is the customers are complaining, they are grumbling, and based on his observation he might be able to pursue further and try to find out what is wrong, what is causing those problems. So therefore a broad problem area could be that he's trying to find out why his customers are dissatisfied. Another problem could have been that the minority groups are not making career progress. Again, within the organization, a manager sees that his minority employees are not able to make out to the top, or they are not able to reach higher, better positions. Now he would like to know and further investigate if this is by chance, or there are certain problems within the organization which is causing the career of the career improvement of the minority people. So he basically observes that there are certain problems in the organizations. Could be any one of them or could be a number of them, but based on his observation as a manager, his next logical step would be how to resolve them. For that, of course, he could turn up and go and try to research about that problem, and he could try to find out what are the issues which are causing that problem. So the next step would be requiring is to go further. So as I said earlier, that at that particular stage, in the initial stage where he's observed certain things, he might not be able to clearly pinpoint the problem, but he can generally identify a broad area of the problem, which is causing problem with the organization. And one more thing what I would like to add here is that these problems could be pertaining to three different issues. One issue is that a problem could be currently existing in the organization. So this is a problem which is causing a problem in the organization. Another could be that the manager believes that we can improve. It's not exactly a problem, but something which can be improved within the organization. A third type of issue or problem could have been that one could like to conduct research or broad problem area of a broad problem area is if they want to try to examine a phenomena in more detail. A fourth category could have been that the research, the broad problem area is conducted in an area where empirical evidence is needed for a particular problem. What I mean by that, let's have a look at an example in more detail. When I said a current existing problem, a broad problem area could be could be an existing problem. What I mean by that is that the removal of this particular problem is essential, as it can affect the routine operations of the organization. So problems could be, basically, if you're looking at two kinds here. One is really detrimental, which can stop the operation of an organization if not improved, if not removed. The other concern, and the other problem type is where improvement is needed. Now that's another type of a problem, where although the situation is not as bad as the first situation where I'm talking, where we need to remove that problem, but in the second the second type what I was talking about is where the organization would like to improve. All the operations are doing fine, but the situation needs to be enhanced for better performance of the organization. So here we are basically, the operations are in jeopardy. The operations could be stopped if the problems are not resolved. Here the operations are fine. The operations are not that bad, but if you like to improve the efficiency, so a problem could be generally where you need to resolve it immediately. Or it could be something which will help you improve an existing situation. An example for that could be, let's look at the people or in the organization are not regularly attending their work. Now that can mean the operations to stop. Now organizations cannot function without people coming to work. Now that is something which the manager needs to immediately take care of. Also, this could be categorized as an existing problem which needs to be resolved. The second thing is, the second type of example is where required improvement. The example could be that people might come but do not always show 100% commitment to their work. Now, employees are coming to the organization, but they're not as committed as we would like to be. They don't give us 100% of their. Now that is where the improvement could be done, or the operations are not at stake, but we would like to go and try to enhance the output of our employees, and that is the type of a problem where we like to improve the situation. A third type of problem is when we would say is a conceptual, where we try to address a conceptual issue. Here we try to define the concept, because if there are certain concepts and then they are not very clear, and the definition is not very clear, which could mislead and which could create a confusion in terms of what is meant by, let's say, performance. For that, if our research or if our literature doesn't clearly define what performance is or employee performance is, for that we need to really go in detail and try to define that concept. While defining that concept and what comes under performance or employee performance is something we would consider as working on a problem which is of a conceptual nature. Here we would like to identify that performance. When we say performance, we need to be very clear as, is it an organizational performance or we are talking about employee performance? And again, if it's an employee performance, how do we measure the performance of an employee? What is the ideal way of measuring performance? Again, for measuring jobs which are physically intensive, you might need different parameters for that. For jobs which are more mental intensive, we need a different parameter for measuring their performance. So this sort of issue and is what we call as a conceptual issue, and if there is no clear-cut definitions on that, then research can help us out to find out, to clarify, and to be able to properly define the concept. So this is another type of a problem which could be addressed. And the third one is termed as an empirical type of a problem, which we try to do. We want to empirically test we would like to test the relationship between certain variables, like if we say that attendance has a relationship with performance, we would like to not just theorize it, but we would like to empirically find out if this is really true or not. But by empirically, I mean we need to collect data. Based on data, we'll try to establish that attendance and performance are related, considering organizations where attendance is high and of employees and their performance is also high. So we need to empirically verify if the theory-wise we were saying that people who are more attentive or have high attendance all tend to perform better. This is a theory which needs to be empirically tested, and for that when we conduct research, this research basically empirically tries to identify or remove this particular problem. So the broad problem areas could be that the career progress of individuals is not as was expected, the attendance is not high, flexi time is not productive enough, sales are low, management of complex project is difficult. These are all different examples of broad problem area, and what basically we want to know is what are the different factors which might influence any one of these problems, such as career progress. What are the issues which are affecting the career progress of our employees, our minority employees? Is flexi time related to performance? Can flexi time be related to performance? By offering flexi time, has organizational members improved in their performance? What are the how can we enhance the attendance of our employee? So what are the factors which are influencing? So these all are different examples of broad problem area within the organization. So organizations are coming, they have all these different types of problems, and managers would like to resolve them, would like to solve them, and for that they basically, after their journal observation, the very next step one tends to do is we try to collect some preliminary information regarding that issue. For that we basically try to narrow down the broad problem area by studying, collecting some preliminary information. In this particular stage, we try to interview from our other employees, co-workers, and try to find out as if the phenomena or the problem we have observed, is it really happening or it's just a coincidence. We would like to see and talk to people and interview them and try to see that what are their views on that particular one. And the second kind of information we collect, as I said earlier, is by going to the library and conducting research, conducting a literature review on that. So we do sort of interviewing our employees of an organization where the problems is existing. The second thing could be what we would do to get more information about the issue. We could go to the library and trying to find out different kind of literature which is available addressing that particular problem area. So we try to understand the problem in a more detail and develop a theory based on that. So once we are able to collect some more information on that, we might be able to develop our own theory about the issue and try to find out what are the different variables which are affecting that particular problem. So as I said earlier in the previous slide, that considering all these different areas of research of the problem, we would like to know what are the factors which are influencing them. For that, we, as I said, we can talk to our employees or the individuals working in an organization, or we can also collect some information from the library. We will be able to find some relevant information from the literature which has been published on and it is relevant to this particular problem area. Now, once, as I said, we have identified the broad problem area, we to move the step forward is to try to find out more information about that problem, particular problem area. And one way of doing that is, if it's not an organization we are studying and its issue is concerned to a particular organization, we would like to get some background information on the organization, such as the type of organization it is, the structure it has, the kind of employees working there, and the other kind of information, as I said, is the other kind of information we'll try to collect is prevailing knowledge on that topic. That is the literature which is available on that topic. While considering the background information, as I said earlier, of the organization, and the for our as a secondary information, we can find out as to the organization, what kind of history it has, what kind of chart it has, what kind of resources it utilizes, what kind of function it performs, what kind of financial position it has. So considering all these background information will provide us some background to the problem as to is these problems which the organization facing, it has got to do with its structure, is it got to do with its financial situation, is it got to do with its resources, or is it got to do with its own functioning. For example, that we say that we're trying to, for example, we're trying to get information gathered on the financial status of an organization, and from there we will be able to find out that the cash flow are bad within the organization. Now this information can indicate that the organization might have high rate of return of its product, and the high rate of the return of products could be caused by many other things like the quality of the product or workmanship of the product. So by looking at some of the data, we are able to pinpoint that the organizational has certain inbuilt problems, inbuilt structural issues, which are basically indicating two different problems. This kind of information also helps us be more prepared while we're trying to interview the employees, the other employees, about that particular issue. So once we try to collect some background information, we're ready to go and talk to these people, these employees, and try to see if what we have a hunch is right or wrong. What could be from the other's point of view, from the employee's point of view, what could be the different reasons. So before we go into the discussion with or interviewing the employees about the problem, background will be able to provide us as researchers and then more information about the organization, and we will be more prepared about it. How much information is needed? As I said earlier, that we tend to collect information, background information about the organization, but we need to use our own judgment, and we need to see what kind of information is relevant to the problem. If we're talking about the career progress, the sort of information we'd like to know is that what are the employment policies we've got, what are sort of the evaluation systems we've got, what are the reward mechanisms do we have in the organizations, or maybe, so all these different issues could be related to the career progress. So we need to collect information regarding the issues which are around the career progress issue problem. So coming back to the judgment aspect, we need to see what is the problem area and collect information which is relevant to that particular problem area. So once we start interviewing these individuals, we can start tabulating the different views of these individuals, and we try to find out if there are any trends, if there are any patterns in the responses of the interview. So we try to see what are other people talking, what are the other people are saying about the issue or the problem we are referring to. Now, once we have some information, background information of the organization, we have all gone through some interviews of the employees which might be able to reflect on the issue. We are now a little more ready to find out what is available in terms of the literature which has been published in the journals, in books about that issue. So what we need to do is we need to see, we need to find out what are the different certain factors which have been frequently mentioned regarding the issue, such as untrained personnel, unsafe work environment. These are different issues, and what are the different factors which have been identified in the literature. And with the help of literature, we can see how other perceive, other than the view which we have already obtained from our employees or the workers of the organization. What do they think are the reasons, the causes of that problem? By going through the literature review, we will be able to find out what other organizations say about that problem. What do they identify as key factors which are influencing it? So you have your internal for the factors which influence the particular issue. That is one type of different variables we are able to identify. The other kind is the variables which are available in the literature. So by now at this stage, after this stage basically, you are more ready into as to more informed about the kind of variables which are influencing the broad problem area. So before I go to the next topic, which is the literature survey, let me, as I said earlier, that the literature survey provides us with information as to what kind of different variables affect the broad problem area. The literature survey is basically is again an effort to document the different variables which exist in the literature, mostly from published and sometimes unpublished data. We could access that kind of data from our libraries, books, the web and magazines, conference proceedings, different theses, common publications, and financial reports. So these are the different sources from which we can survey the literature. And why do we why do we have a literature survey? A good literature survey ensures that we are able to distinguish between symptoms and real problems. What I mean by that is that sometimes while we are conducting our research, we might be able to think that a certain problem, certain factors is causing the problem. But while going through the literature, we will be able to identify that that problem, which as we identified, as the key factor was not the actual factor, it was just a symptom. The actual cause is something else. Just like in the case of a patient, when he is sick or he's got fever, we tend to see that maybe that the individual is sick, but by treating the fever is not good enough, basically, because the fever is caused by something else. The real problem could be a sore throat, which is basically which is causing temperature of rise in temperature of an individual. So we need to go deeply and find out that what is the real problem, rather than symptoms, because by treating the symptom or just by taking Panadol for temperature is not good enough, because if you've got a sore throat, we need to take some kind of antibiotic. That's the only way we'll be able to resolve the problem. Otherwise, we will just temporarily taking care of the problem, and the problem might come back. So by going into detailed literature, we'll be able to identify what are the actual reasons of a problem. To demonstrate that, we will go in the next slide. We'll give you an example on that. But now let's look at the other few things which are considered good, because while conducting literature survey, we're able to develop our theoretical frameworks. We have much clearer picture in our mind as to what kind of theory we need to develop, and what sort of hypothesis we'll need to develop. So literature sort of helps us crystallize our theoretical framework and our hypothesis. It also helps us develop our problem statements more clearly, and it helps us to avoid reinventing the wheel. What I mean by that is, once we are able to go into the literature and find out what existing literature have already done, if something which has already been done and proven with, we don't need to really go and research it. All we need to do is, based on that, we need to take certain actions. But if certain areas have not been researched, for that we can go and conduct research. But if certain areas which have already been researched, we don't really need to conduct research for that. And another good thing about conducting literature is we are able, once we are able to review literature in our research, that creates credibility in the minds of the scientific community, that whatever research we have conducted is not something a figment from our own imagination. It's based on existing literature. We have studied the different literature, and after synthesizing the literature, we are able to develop our own theoretical framework. So the scientific community basically is able to recognize that this particular research researcher has gone through the different literature, understood the problem, understood the issue, and then based on the existing literature, he's been able to identify the causes of the problem and design the research accordingly. So these are the different advantages of conducting literature survey. The literature, as we said earlier, literature survey basically helps us identify, as we identify the relevant sources. It helps in literature survey we extract the relevant information, and finally what we do is we write our literature review. The different kind of relevant sources for our literature survey and review are the bibliographic databases, in which different article names, their date, the authors are there. These are databases which have basically a list of articles are there with names, authors in it. Another type of database which is available is called the abstract database. In these databases, again, different existing literature is a list of different literature is available with the summary of, or the abstract of the literature, abstract of the research in this particular databases. So the first one is again a type of a database which you can search to find out the articles regarding the problem area. That first, the bibliographic database, all it gives you the title of the article, the name of the author, the date of the article, the journal the article has been published, which is just a few lines of that. And the second one is the abstract database, which basically has all the above information plus an abstract or summary of what the research has been conducted on. And the third type kind of a databases which exist are called the full databases, full scale databases, in which all the articles, the full detail of the articles, summaries, author name, the full-fledged article is available in these databases. Although access to these articles, the full database articles, is restricted because of the membership. Either you have to take a certain membership of these with databases, you have to subscribe to them, or sometimes you can buy individual articles from these full databases for your own research. Once you are able to have your literature, or you have already surveyed your literature, you have already extracted the articles, because once you start searching, what you will do is you will be able to find hundreds of these articles and books available on the net, especially because of nowadays the search engines will be able to pull out many articles. The issue is that how to carefully select what is needed. For that, there are two guidelines. One is that you need to see if all these articles, or from all these hundreds of articles, which are relevant to you. And second thing you need to look at is the quality of the literature which have been available in that list. So first thing you need to look at is how relevant that article is and what is the quality of that article. While looking at the relevance of the article, you can look at by looking at the title of the article, you will be able to know that if this article is relevant to the broad problem area you are focusing on. By looking at the abstract of the articles, you again will be able to find out that what is the purpose of this particular article, what kind of research plan this article has followed, what were the findings of this article, and what were the conclusions. So all this information will be able to help you establish if this particular article is relevant to your broad problem area. Another area, while looking through the research article, which you might be able to download, is you can go through the introduction of that particular introduction area of the article, which will be able to give you an overview of the problem addressed. It should be able to identify the different specific research objectives this particular article is addressing, and it ends up with the introduction portion ends up with the summary of the research questions the research article is going to address. So by going through going through the introduction, the abstract, the title of, you will be able to get a very good idea as to if this article is relevant to you. The same goes for books. By looking at the contents of the book, a table of contents, one could be able to, and the title of the book, you will be able to know if this book is relevant and which chapter of this particular book is relevant to the broad problem area you are focusing at. So first thing you wanted to look at while surveying is if the article is relevant, because there are hundreds and thousands of articles which might be pulled out on the net while you search on your keyword on your broad problem area, and you need to find out if they are relevant or not. The second thing is you want to find out if the quality of the articles are good enough or not. For that, one thing you can look at is what kind of journal this particular article has been published in. By looking at that, this is one quick way of identifying if the article is of a good quality or not. You can also try to see if the particular article has been able to clearly state their problem statement. Another thing you could look at is has this article been able to establish their research problem based on the previous studies, building that this particular study is built on the previous research. They're taking it from point onward. They have reviewed all the existing literature, all the existing studies concerning that article, and then they have moved on from that point onwards, considering all what has already been done and contributing something new. So that's another way of establishing if a good review is included in an article. That's a good indication of the quality of the researcher. And the third is that what sort of if they have been able to use appropriate qualitative or quantitative tools for analysis. So you need to see if the article you're looking at has been able to use the right appropriate tools for analysis. So these and there are many more ways of looking at the quality, but as the list goes on, but generally if the article is published in a good research journal, which is a peer-reviewed journal or is an impact fact journal, that could give you a quick assessment of the quality of the article. What kind of information you need to extract from your research articles? One thing you need to look at when going through a research article, you need to identify what is the problem this particular article is addressing. The second thing you like to look at is what sort of variables it's trying to identify and work with, what sort of sample the particular research article has considered, what kind of how did they go about the data collection, what kind of data analysis have they done, what sort of results they've been able to come up with, and what were the conclusions. So while going through the research article, this is the sort of information you can extract and maybe note it down on a separate piece of paper, so that once you want to go back to this, review this or consult this article, all you need to do is quickly go through this cover sheet and know that this particular article deals with this particular problem, is considering XYZ variables, had considered this kind of sample and population, what kind of how the data was collected. So all this information, the journal information, you need to extract from each of these different research articles, because this particular exercise can help you conduct your literature review in a more professional manner. So once you're able to survey, you need to now write your review. You need to write your literature review, which is basically your documenting of the relevant studies, as I said earlier, which have been cited and in your study. So you document and you write a review on the literature which you already have studied. Basically, you want to reference all the key studies which have been conducted in that particular area. You want to make sure that you want to make sure that the different references, books and articles which you have considered are the latest, because again you want to make sure not the key or the classic the articles have been covered, as well as the latest articles are also covered. So while surveying, you need to look at both the types of articles in that particular broad problem area. And the second thing, you need to make sure that you also have the most recent research articles done, and what they have said in these particular researches have to be considered in your literature review. The literature review is a clear, basically, presentation of a relevant research work done thus far in the area. So it's a presentation of existing literature which has been written in that particular area. All relevant information should be coherent while writing your review. Make sure that the review is written in a logical manner, and where different ideas are linked and are basically moving in a logical way. While writing your literature review, in the introduction portion specifically, one needs to make sure that you need to identify the importance of the issue, why you are conducting research for that particular problem. Why are you conducting the research? Why is that problem so important? What is the significance of that problem? Second thing, while writing your introduction to the problem, you can also talk about the purpose of the study, and finally you can talk about the key concepts of which this particular broad problem area covers. Also, you like to also identify the major research literatures which have already been considered, and we like to identify the different gaps which the existing literature has not covered. Finally, we like to discuss the variables and their relationship to help us formulate the framework and the hypothesis statement of our research. So based on the variables identified in the existing literature and the relationship it has with the broad problem area, we develop our own framework and hypothesis. For an example, what I have done is I have downloaded an article which deals with the effect of flexi time on employee attendance and performance. What we'll try to do is try to see that how the literature review has been conducted in this particular article. So let me download this particular article. So this is a research article which has been published in the Academy of Management Journal in 1981 of its volume 24, and this article deals with the effect of flexi time on employee attendance and performance, a field experiment. This title is basically letting us know that this particular article deals with the issue of flexi time on employee attendance and performance. So we're trying to see if, by considering this title, what we can see is that this article is trying to establish the relationship between flexi time and attendance and flexi time and performance. This article has been written by J. Kims and Anthony Campin from Ohio State University. Right after the title and the author's name, what you can find out is that it has an abstract here, which basically is a summary of what the article is about. And if we can go quickly on through that, we can see that what it tries to establish. It says the effect of flexi time program in a country welfare agency are assessed. So this is what it's trying to see, generally trying to identify what the particular article has tried to do is to assess the flexi time program through analysis of covariance of the employee attendance and performance, revealed that the flexi time program appears to permit employees to reduce their use of unpaid absence, and performance efficiency tends to be higher among employees. So this particular, the first paragraph which you tend to usually see is the abstract, and this basically tells us what the objective of the study was, the problem which we're addressing, what kind of variables it has considered. As you can see, it's talking about flexi time here, it's talking about the absences, the attendance, and talks about the efficiency. So it talks about all these variables, and then it also tries to identify that what were the findings in just one or two lines, what were the key findings of this particular research article. What I wanted to share with you is that how this author has been able to very nicely follow the way a literature review should be written. What you can see in the first few lines, it tries to, the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines, it tries to identify the importance of flexi time, why flexi time is so important, why should flexi time and studies related to flexi time should be considered, because it says that according to one report, approximately 13% of the employing organizations in the private sector have adopted flexi time programs. So the first few lines while writing your literature review is you need to talk about the importance of the study, why it's so important, why should that your variable, the problem area, the variable with the problem area has to be considered and studied. Why is it so important? So the first few lines, this article talks about the importance of that study, and then from these online onwards, it tries to clearly identify that the purpose of the study is to investigate the effect of flexi time on employee attendance and performance in the field setting. So it starts with giving them, telling the importance of the study, why it's so important, why one should it. So it creates the interest of the reader that this area is important. Then it talks about the purpose of the study, that the purpose of this particular study is, one thing is to establish a link between flexi time and with employee attendance and performance in a field setting. So while writing your literature review, this is how you should start. It should, in the very first few lines, you should be able to identify the purpose of the research, and just following that, if you look at it, this author has very nicely also defined the key concept, the definition of the key concept, starting with that he's trying to define that although there are a number of variations and forms, the basic model of flexi time usually consists of 5 interrelated components. Now here he tries to define the concept, what flexi time is all about, and then further down he talks about what is employee performance and what is what when we say employee attendance is considered to be what it is, what this variable covers. So right after the first giving the importance, the purpose of study, it now tries to clarify what are the key variables and their definitions as to what is the general definitions which cover flexi time, so that the reader is able to establish a quick understanding of the issue and is not confused about the issue. So in the first few paragraphs, this is what the author tends to do. Now if you look at the second paragraph, the second page, that the author now tries to synthesize and tries to identify the gap in the existing literature. It says, following the extensive review of the literature on flexi time, these authors in 1978 have reported that 16 empirical studies have been examined only, one including any statistical treatment. So here he's trying to identify that there have been 16 studies examined, but only out of the 16, one had empirically, statistically done a treatment to that data. So this is where he's trying to establish that in the existing literature, this is the gap, and this is what he wants to address, which he tends to do in the data part of the literature review. And by towards the end of this literature review, which he has done, he presents his problem statements, which is, does the flexi time program affect the employee absenteeism? Does the flexi time program affect the employee performance efficiency? So based on what the existing literature has said, and based on what the gap has been identified, his study is categorically now trying to address that, does the flexi time program affect employee absenteeism? Does flexi time program affect the employee performance? So these are the research questions. So generally what you will find when writing or while reading a literature review, you will find that in the very first portion it talks about the importance of the issue, talks about the purpose of the study, and then tries to define the key concepts of the key variables of the study, moving on to discussing different literatures and identifying the gaps within the literature where certain researches have not been conducted, or there is a gap which needs to be fulfilled, and this gap which the author has been able to identify is going to be addressed by the help of this particular two questions which he has narrowed down to for his study. So considering this example, let's get back to the our slides. That what you see is, after you are able to go through your literature survey and write your literature review, you are now basically ready to talk about your problem statements. But before we talk about the problem statements, one thing also we need to look at is how do we reference the research articles in our research studies. There are two basically things you need to really look at. One is when you are trying to build what we call as a bibliography or a reference list. Usually a reference list is a list of articles which your studies have used for referencing, such as this particular article, Management on the World Wide Web by Inglewood. This particular book, is published in 1997 by Lenson, and this is what we call as a reference list or bibliographic or a bibliography, in which we basically try to list down all the books, research articles which have been used in our research, particularly in our literature review, and a full detail of these articles are put at the end of your research article. One of the examples which I have, the example which I'm giving right you now, is the APA format, and on page number 61 you can find more of these examples. While referencing and quoting within the literature, we tend to use something like this. We tend to write something like this, like Todd in 1998 has shown, and then we can talk about his study. This is how we are referencing our research, existing research in our literature review. We are quoting, we are trying to identify another way of this. In 1997, Kyle compared the dual carrier and dual so forth. We're trying to identify the author and the year of its publication. So two things are very important while referencing. We try to identify the author's name, the last name, the year of that publication, and there are different ways of writing. More examples could be seen on page 64 of the book. And the first thing, as I talked about, how once these references have been quoted in our literature, we try to create a bibliography list at the end of the article, indicating the full details of the article, the name of the article, where it was published, and where was it published, and what were the other different authors of that particular article. So for details of these you could find on page 61 and 64. So once you are you're ready with your problem, your literature review, you have been able to done, as I said, you conclude with your literature review with clear-cut problem statements, and as I said earlier, that after interviewing and the literature review, the researcher are in a better position to narrow down the problem from the broad problem area, and we are able to generate more specific problem statements. And a problem statement, as said, it's a clear, precise statement of this specific issue that research intends to address. A problem also could be of interest in an issue where finding the right answer might help improve the existing situation. So we need to be careful that we do not define symptoms, but we define problems. As I said earlier, the example of a symptom versus a real problem could be that a symptom which we consider a symptom problem could be that our organization has low productivity, or a manufacturing plant has low productivity. But in reality, the real problem could be the low morale. That is, it's not that employees are not working hard. I mean, the productivity is low because they're not giving enough money, but it could be that the employees are not given enough recognition. So while treating the low productivity problem, one needs to look at that. Is it because of that we are not giving incentives enough, or is it got to do with recognition? So the solution for the low productivity one could be, which again is a superficial one, could be that we could increase the piece rate of manufacturing, and we can think that with this maybe we will be able to improve our productivity and enhance our productivity. But if the issue with the real problem with the employees is of low morale, even giving more money cannot solve this kind of problem. For that, again, you need to use different kind of tools, solutions, such as recognition. So again, we need to identify between the real problem and the symptom, and then we need to clearly state our problems. A few examples of problems, statements of the problems are such as: to what extent has the new advertising campaign been successful in creating a high quality, customer centered corporate image? That is, to what extent has the new advertising campaign have been successful in creating high quality, customer centered corporate image. So we want to find out that to what extent advertising has been able to improve the corporate image. Another problem statement, could be: how has new packaging affected the sales of our product? So we want to test, or we want to find out that while improving the packaging of the product, has sales improved or not. So we want to test that. So it's a very well-defined problem statement. Another could be: how do price and quality rate on consumer evaluation? Is it as to what is more preferred by the consumer? Is it price or quality? Another problem statement could be: does better automation lead to greater investment? So if by improving the automation, can we get more investment in our organization? So if you look at it, all of these are in the form of a question, and these are basically what we need to answer at the end of the research. Let's look at another example of a broad problem area: literature review and problem statement. We can find out that the broad problem area, as we identified earlier in the example, is that low productive employee. While going through the literature review, we identify that there are the low productive could be due to the faulty machines. We find out it's because of the low pay rate. It could be because of the low morale. So initially, once we had as an observation, as we started up earlier, as managers, as researchers, when we observe that there is something wrong with the organization, we need to collect some information on that issue. So while collecting information, we are able to find out that faulty machines could be one of the causes for low productivity. Low pay rate could be another cause of the issue, and low morale could be another one. So while going through literature, you are able to know what are the different factors which might influence, and through literature survey or review, you are able to enhance your understanding of the issue, and based on that, you are able to develop your problem statement. At this stage, you could now say that is the low morale of employee at plant X the cause of low productivity. Now this is now a problem statement which needs to be further researched, on which we need to collect data and prove that is it low morale, or maybe is it the faulty machine, or is it maybe is it low. Among all these 3-4 different factors, what is the factor which is causing the most in terms of low productivity? So to conclude our session, what we have done in the last hour and a half so is we are able to identify the first 3 steps of the research process. In this 3 steps, the first step we looked at the broad problem area. I will try to identify the broad problem area. And to understand the broad problem area, we did some preliminary information gathering through interviews and through literature survey. And after conducting our interviews and literature survey, since we are able to have a more clear understanding of the issue and the factors influencing the issue and the kind of relationship these issues have on it, we are able to develop or present our problem statements more clearly. And what else? We also looked at how to reference, how do we develop our bibliography or reference list, and how to develop our how to quote, how to do referencing within our literature. For the coming session, we will be further going on and talking about developing our framework and hypothesis based on, again, the literature which we already reviewed and the problem statements we have already developed. So we will be able to develop our framework around that of our research and develop hypothesis based on the research we have already studied. So with this we conclude our session, and the next session we will talk about developing our theoretical framework and hypothesis development. Thank you very much.